Okay, scholars, welcome to American Government. We're getting ready to start Chapter 1, American Government and Politics in a Racially Divided World. I'm Professor Callahan, and here we go. When we talk about American government and a racially divided world, we're talking about many things. One thing that government does, government has a nature. What does government do? What is government's real function? Well, government is a social institution that controls the behavior of people. That's one thing government really does. It controls us. It tells us how we conduct ourselves in society, how we treat our neighbors, how we treat each other, and it really is. A way of government's job is to control how we conduct ourselves. Now there are some people who kind of break laws, but the vast majority of us follow the rules, or at least we try to, right? So when we talk about government is a major mechanism for managing conflicts, controlling behaviors when people interact to maintain peace and order. That is true. Government's job is to control our behaviors by managing conflicts. And when we talk about politics is literally it is this idea of conflict amongst groups of people over scarce resources. And when we talk about the functions of government, one of the things government does is provides security. Government's job is to protect us. The federal government's job is to protect us from foreign invaders. Local government, state and local government's job is protect us from pretty much really each other, because some of us live in places where people might break into your house. Actually, all of us can literally live in a place that does that, right? Serving the public good, doing what's best for all of us. Some people would argue wearing a mask is for the public good, is definitely for public health, right? But others might disagree with that. Now, do we always agree? Not at all. But that's why it's government's job to sometimes intervene and to have us conduct and run our pretty much conduct ourselves and how we run our lives. I mean, government, that's why we have courts. The role of the courts is to solve our issues, right? That's why it's managing, resolving conflict. That's why we have courts. That's why we have police. Law enforcement is supposed to come and even resolve conflict. Sometimes they might arrest us. That might be a way to resolve it. Other times they might separate us and tell one person to go one way and tell another to go another. Also, it offers services. May it be EBT, may it be Social Security. Social Security is something we do pay in, but it is a service, right? Not everybody has to necessarily collect Social Security. Be aware of that. Even though you might pay into it, some people make a lot of money. They don't necessarily have to collect that Social Security when they reach that age of retirement, because they might have accumulated some wealth on property. That's a good way to accumulate wealth, is through property. When we talk about types of government in our system of government is a democracy, right? It's a system of government in which the people exercise political power. How do we do that? We do that by voting. Okay, direct democracy, a direct democracy in which the people are able to participate directly in the decision-making process. We are not a direct democracy necessarily on a federal level. Some people would argue in California we are on a more state and our local level, especially with a recall election. We can do, in California, we can recall the governor, right? I believe you need about 2.5 million registered voters to force a recall. So it doesn't take much in a state of 40 million people. Indirect and representative democracy, that is what we really are, especially on a federal level, even on local and state level, because we elect people to go to City Hall, to the water board, to the school board, to the community college district board, to the county board of supervisors. Also to the state, to Sacramento, or even to Washington, D.C. We elect people to go there. They make these decisions for us because, you know what, I'm just a little too busy. I can't do everything all day, every day when it comes to bills and laws, and I just don't have the time to always vote on that stuff. A lot of us have a hard time voting every 4 years or every 2 years, right? Every 2 years we have House of Representative members up for election. Every 4 years we have governor and president up for election. Every 6 years we have our senators, our federal senators, up for election, and a lot of us don't even do that, right? When we talk about types of government, we constitution, we have a state constitution. Also on a federal level, we have a federal constitution. When we talk about a constitution, a set of formal rules and principles governing a state, may it be a nation state, may it be a state, may it be a city state. Now, there are city states. The Vatican is a city state, okay? The Vatican is just a city. There's not much else to it, and it sits in Rome, so you know it's really not that big. A constitutional democracy, which we are, is a government that derives its authority from a constitution. We have a constitution. The United States Constitution is the final authority in how we as a nation follow the rules that are in place. And if if the Supreme Court rules unconstitutional, that means it cannot be a law. You will have laws separate but equal. Plessy versus Ferguson. One Supreme Court said that separate but equal, Plessy versus Ferguson, was constitutional. No more than 60 years later, Brown v. Board versus the Board of Education of Topeka, Kansas, overturned that and said that separate but equal is unconstitutional. So what happened? Well, what happened was the Supreme Court changed, right? So when the Supreme Court changes, it depends on the ideology of the Supreme Court members. And so sometimes you'll have you have a majority conservative court. Other times you'll have a majority liberal court. The funny thing is with the Supreme Court, though, is Supreme Court members, the 9 justices, are lifetime appointments. So it's very important that when you're thinking about voting, you're thinking about you and yourself and how it affects you, right? A lot of times, a lot of us tend to vote on issues that maybe our parents might be for or against. And if you really look at your parents' lifestyle or wealth, they might be in a different tax bracket than you. So you might be voting against your own interests because you're voting in line with your parents. So usually when it comes to things like voting, that's why you vote your own interests, and it might not align up with those in your own family. When we talk about types of government, characteristics of a constitutional democracy, one thing we do in a constitutional democracy, we have free elections with free political opposition. So in our system right now, we have 2 political parties, right? We have Democrats and Republicans. Now we do have many, about 20 smaller parties, but really our system is really a 2-party system. Yes, they kind of do it that way, but I will get into that when we get into political parties. Another characteristic is free press and media that operate independently of the government. It is so important to have an independent media to hold the government, to hold the feet to the fire, as they say, right? It's really important that we have a media that does that. I know right now we're in our way our system works. We have liberal and conservative media, and so conservatives call the mainstream media liberal, and the liberals call conservative media Fox News or OWN, or what is that, OANN, and those type of networks. But the reality is, and this is what I encourage everyone to do, is to do your own research. And when you do your research, don't just do research in the sense of that you are that when you're doing this research, you're not getting it. Like, for instance, if you're going to MSNBC, That's fine. Go to MSNBC. I don't have no problem with that. But also go to BBC, go to PBS, and even go to Fox News and see what they're saying. Now, I'm going to argue if 3 out of the 4 are saying the same thing, the 4th one probably is not the one that's telling you the truth. And when you listen to media, especially when you listen to nighttime weekday news on cable, know that those are opinions. Okay, if you want to get real news, get it in the daytime. Fox, MSNBC, CNN tends to give you news, straight news in the daytime. When you head to the evening, those are opinion pieces. Rachel Maddow, Tucker Carlson, Don Lemon. They are they are opinion shows. Now, are they journalists? Yes, they are journalists, but if you watch them, they really do have a lot of opinion. It's really opinion based. A good example is also Fox News. Fox News in the daytime and Fox News at night are like polar opposites. They really are. I wouldn't tell people to watch it, but I would really say watch Fox News at 11 and then go to 6 o'clock and see the difference. And you'll even see how Brett Baer talks about the same issue that Tucker Carlson will talk about, or Sean Hannity will talk about that evening. You'll be surprised how different the things that are coming out of their mouths. Also, a characteristic is a regularly held election, peaceful transfer of power. That is so important to our way of government. In January 6th of 2021, we did have an insurrection. I know some people I know some of you might say it wasn't an insurrection. It was. Anytime a group of people, I don't care who it is, Antifa, Black Lives Matter, or Trump, QAnon supporters, and they try to disrupt our way of government, our system of government, that's an insurrection, and it's not right. Okay, one thing America has always prided itself on in its 200 and almost 50 years of existence is the peaceful transfer of power. Now, we still have the peaceful transfer of power, but for the first time in modern history, a sitting president did not go to the incoming president's inauguration. And that doesn't look good. It doesn't look good it doesn't look good for us as Americans, but for around the world. If we're trying to sell this concept of democracy and this idea that our system of government works, then the players must all play a part. You shouldn't allow your personal feelings to get in the way. And then another characteristic is protections for personal and civil rights. It is so important in our system of government that everyone is protected. May it be the poor white person in Appalachia, or the young Black man in Chicago, in the inner city of Chicago, to the Asian American who is living in Diamond Bar, California, right? Or the Chicano in Los Angeles. It doesn't matter. Everybody should have rights. Our LGBTQ plus brothers and sisters also should have rights. Those of a different religion should have rights. See, and I know people are going to have a problem with this, and we're going to get into this when we get into the Constitution, but when we talk about America, some people tend to think, and some people argue that America is a Christian nation, but is it? That's a question that we have to ask ourselves. America, this nation doesn't have an official religion, so America can't be a Christian nation. Now, majority of our leaders subscribe to being Christians, but as a nation, officially, we're not a Christian nation. So when we talk about protecting rights, we have to protect everybody's rights. And I know there will be some who are listening to this who will argue, but I don't believe in this group I don't believe in the lifestyle that they lead. That's okay. You don't have to believe it, but they should have those rights. Principles of a constitutional democracy: the rule of law, the predominance of law over discretionary authority. Now, when we talk about the rule of law is like our Constitution is based on the rule of law. Whatever the law says, we have to follow it. We can argue: is the law always fair in America? Not at all. Not at all. Some people can say based on race. A lot of us could say based on social status and income and wealth. You know, a rich person's less inclined to do prison time than a poor person, or even any jail time. A rich person is likely to go down to downtown, do their fingerprints, get arrested, and then 30 minutes later, pay bail and move and go out. If you're poor and bail is set at $500 and you don't have $500, you're gonna sit in jail, and you can be there 6 months to a year whenever your case is brought before the courts. And if the courts are over inundated with court cases, it can take, like I said, 6 months to a year. So what happens to the idea of a speedy trial? Not always so speedy, huh? It depends on how fast we consider speed to be. Natural law that comes from nature and is superior to statutory law. Now, when we talk about natural law, there's just some things that are just natural to life. There's some people that believe in natural law and will say that natural law, like this, is superior to statutory law. So statutory law is things that are written down. Natural law is just like, it just is like some people say life, liberty, and property, like John Locke would say, would be a natural law, a natural right, and which we come into rights by which every person is entitled, such as life and liberty. These rights are not dependent on government. I have a friend who always argues that everybody we're humans of the earth, we're citizens of the earth, he always says. He says, as citizens, there should be no borders, which would be under natural rights. And again, when we talk about these things and this idea of natural law, natural law is superior to written law and passed by legislators. That natural law theory holds the systems of right or justice comes from nature rather than rules of society that applies to all persons. Human beings have the ability to reason. So we have an ability to reason, and through the use of reason are able to determine the proper and the correct thing to do. And it's funny because Cicero, who was an ancient philosopher from Rome, he argued this idea of natural law. He says, there is in fact a true law, namely right reason, which is in accordance with nature, applies to all men, and is unchangeable and eternal. By its commands, this law summons men to performance of their duties. By its prohibitions, it refrains them from doing wrong. It commands and prohibitions always influence good men, but are without effect on the bad. To invalidate this law by human legislation is never morally right, nor is it permissible to restrict its operation, and to annul it wholly impossible. So what he's really saying is, and I'm gonna just break it down to you really easily, is that we as human beings, we know right from wrong. You know what's right. And if you know what's right, you're gonna do right. It's kind of like Maya Angelou says, when you know better, you do better. Now, if you don't, if you don't know what's right, then you're probably not going to do right. So when we talk about natural law, this idea of natural law, it's just natural. It comes natural. And I will argue that when we talk about natural law, I don't always think that natural law is necessarily like you're born to know right from wrong. I believe it's taught. But if everybody in society adheres to do the right thing, guess what? You're going to do the right thing 9 times out of 10. Now we're going to have those people who will not. But again, when people don't do the right thing, we really got to look into the backstory of why they are who they are and why they're doing what they're doing. Foundations of American government. The American political system is based on several theories of government and political traditions. Classical liberalism. So now when I'm talking about this, let me make myself clear. We're not talking about Democrats and Republicans, okay? So I want to make sure we all understand that. It's not in the in what we believe to be liberalism and republicanism. Okay, we are conservatism. What we're talking about is classic liberalism and classic republicanism and inegalitarianism, traditions of exclusion. So I'm going to hit on a little bit of this, and for the rest of this lecture, I'm going to touch on this, and then I'm going to wrap it up, and then I'm going to tell you what to do next. Foundations of American government. We're talking about classical liberalism, a body of Western European political philosophy concerned with the freedom of the individual and the role of government in protecting that freedom. So, and when we get into the Constitution, we're going to talk about our Bill of Rights, because that's where the Bill of Rights come from. And our Bill of Rights come from the English Bill of Rights. And so we as Americans, all we did was knock off the English part and call it the Bill of Rights, and we made it our own. And it's largely based on the works of liberal theorist Thomas Hobbes and Locke, largely concerned with the idea that people enter into a social contract by creating government to protect themselves and create a civil society. That's true. We have created this government, and by creating this government through this social contract, we agree to adhere to do certain things to be good citizens. And again, not everybody adheres to it, and we can argue when people don't adhere to it. Sometimes it has to do with, it's situational, right? And so everybody is not raised the same. We have differences based on our skin color. We have differences based on our social class. We have differences based on our gender. We have differences based on our religious beliefs. Again, if you're a Christian in America, you tend to be received a little better than if you're another type of religion. And I'm not going to go into any type because I don't want to offend or to make anybody feel left out. And this is John Locke and Thomas Hobbes, and they look like theorists. When we talk about foundations of American government, there's four classic characteristics of classical liberalism. Liberalism is optimistic. Liberalism favors the individual over the group. So doesn't that already sound like America? America, we tend to be very optimistic and most of us tend to believe we're going to do well. If I go to school and get a college degree, I will have a better life. Isn't that kind of optimistic? Yeah, that's a liberalism type of idea. That's a liberalism way to think. Liberalism favors the individual over the group. And as Americans, we're very individualistic as a nation, as a people. A lot of us like to think a lot of times, oh no, I'm not like everybody else. I'm special. I'm just me. Right? And then we have liberalism supports free market economies. Capitalism, that's liberalism. Liberalism places reason before faith. And that tends to be true to an extent. Now I will argue that in our system, in our way of life, especially when it comes to our politicians, if our politicians don't show some sort of faith or belief in something higher than themselves, it's pretty hard to be president of the United States, right? But at the same time, our leaders must have, most people want a leader who's smarter than them, right? Now, there's some who, I've seen studies where people said, I'm going to vote for the guy I want to have a beer with. No, I don't. I don't want to have beer with. I didn't want to have beer with Obama. I definitely didn't want to have beer with Trump, and I don't want to have beer with Biden. What I would like, I just want them to be smarter than me, and to do their job. That's all I need them to do. I don't need to do beer. I don't need for us to be friends. I just need them to do their job. That's what I need them to do. Period. When we talk about classical republicanism, it's a theory that rule by the people ought to be indirect through representatives. We kind of have a little bit of that. We definitely do that. We elect people to go to Congress and to represent us, regardless if you're in Yucaipa at Crafton Hills or Rancho Cucamonga at Chaffey College, or if you're in Ventura College. All of you have a representative that goes to Congress that represents you. You vote for them, and and we send them there. So we kind of take a little bit of liberalism and republicanism, right? And this you find their roots in Rome, ancient Rome. Now, ancient Greece was a little more liberal, but ancient Rome was a little more in this idea of republicanism, electing people to represent us. Western European Republican theorists include John Harrington, Alderaan Sidney, and Baron de Montesquieu, largely concerned with civic virtue, which is a sort of subordination of individual self-interest and individualism to the interest of society. And that's so true. This idea of civic virtue, that you have this duty to everyone to conduct ourselves in a manner that's for the betterment of the whole. Okay, and then we go over to 5 characteristics of classical republicanism. Republicanism believes in the virtuous citizenry. Yes, there's this idea of a virtuous citizen, a person who does the right thing all the time for the betterment of all of us. Republicanism is concerned with property. So there's this idea, and if you really look at it, the forefathers believed in that too. You notice John Locke said life, liberty, and property. Thomas Jefferson did not say property. What did Thomas Jefferson say? He said life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness. Why? Because the early forefathers knew early on that those with property should have the right to vote, being white, being male, and owning the property. Look, so majority of the people in the early start of this nation could not vote, because even if they were white male, they didn't have property, and they probably didn't have the education to own it. Really, so George Washington can vote. Benjamin Franklin can vote. Why? They own property. But the poor farmer down the road, who didn't have any enslaved Africans, whose family was pretty much working the farm, probably couldn't read to vote. And he probably didn't own the land. He was probably had a landlord. It was Thomas Jefferson. We don't know. Republicanism sees that the people as the ultimate authority, but believes that they must be kept at a distance. So yeah, this is this idea of electing somebody to go to Congress and be our leaders. Republicanism advocates a distribution of power across branches of government, separate but equal. We got judicial, we got a legislative, and we got an executive. And if we look at our nation, the first branch of our government is our legislative branch. Why is the legislative branch the first branch of government? Well, let me tell you why. It's the first one that was created. Before we had a president, we had a Congress. So that's why. That's the first branch of government. Our second branch is our executive branch. Our third branch is our judicial branch. And all it is the formation of each branch. That's all it's about. And you'll find that about a lot of things in America. Our line of succession for president, behind the president, vice president, the Speaker of the House, President pro tem of the Senate. Then you start going into the cabinet members. And when you start hitting those cabinet positions, they're based on the year of creation. So Secretary of State is only before the Secretary of Treasury, which is the second in creation, is because the Secretary of State, the State Department was the first department of creation. And Thomas Jefferson was it? And I'm probably misspeaking, so let me not say that. Thomas Jefferson, I think it was for our first Secretary of State. Anyway, let's move along to republicanism. Sees the people as ultimate authority, but believes it must be kept at a distance. Republicanism advocates a distribution of power across branches of government. Yes, that's so important. Again, remember I just said separate but equal? They distribute about. Republicanism believes that rights of individuals must be protected. So you have rights, and our rights are really shared with us in our first 10 amendments of our Constitution, which we call the Bill of Rights. And I kind of just went over that and said we stole it from the English. That's why it was called the English Bill of Rights, and we just crossed out the English and called it the Bill of Rights. We're so original in this nation. When we talk about foundations of government, we talk about inegalitarianism, the tradition of excluding large segments of the American population from participating in the political system, despite the language of equality, liberty, and freedom. When we talk about this is in America, America's had a history of this, and we can't talk about government without being honest about those who are marginalized. Okay, again, if our early forefathers, they put in place a system where you had to be a white male and property owner. Okay, yeah, that's going to, and again, if you could be white, you can be male, but if you don't own any property, you can't get anything. And just think, back in those days, one of the wealthiest people in the colonies was Martha Washington. George Washington, when he married outside of his social class because she was really rich. And but she didn't have that. She owned land, and she was white, but she wasn't a man. So does that tend to stop her from having a voice in the government that she was really help funding? And in fact, during the Revolutionary War, they would have tea parties, the wives, and they would raise so much money. In today's money, it would be millions to support the war, like millions. Can you imagine having a tea party and raising millions of dollars at a tea party? Shoot, I need to do that. I need to have a tea party and raise millions of dollars for me. The basis for the exclusion from the political system is subordinate ascriptive traits, largely in terms of race, gender, social class, and religion. And this is true. And look, you guys, when we talk about these things, and when we go through this book and talk about all these issues, we must not be angry. We must not feel guilty. Look, if you're not a racist, if you're not a misogynist or sexist, if you're not a snobby rich person where you mistreat those below you, if you are of a religion that's favored and you don't look down upon others, you have no reason. We can have these discussions and not be offended. And it's so important that we have a real understanding of our nation and where it began, where we're at, and where we want to go. And where we want to go, because we got to get this together, you guys. We are so divided right now, and it's so sad. It breaks my heart to see this nation be so divided based on political parties. And we're going to get to that. We're going to get in the red and the blue, Crips and Bloods, no, Republican and Democrat in a later chapter. And I just wanted to say this is the end. What I would like for you guys all to do is you need to read the rest of the chapter. Okay, I only went over a few of the slides. There's more to the chapter. This book, I think, will really open our eyes up about our system of government and how we can participate, how we can be better citizens. Okay, and I just want to say, I wish you well for this semester, and I will have another PowerPoint slide for you next week. Have a great day.